Welcome, welcome to the hard skills. Today, we are talking about something every leader I work with struggles with. How do you think strategically when it feels like everything you do is on fire or you're just putting out fires constantly? It just feels like the world is on fire and you're just putting them out and you're putting them out. And all you want to do is think strategically, right? And we're going to learn this from an unexpected perspective that I'm super excited about. Frameworks that military leaders use to manage geopolitical crises that can help you build a stronger workplace culture, lead through disruption, and feel less reactive. So let me introduce our guest, Dr. Jill Goldenziel. She is a leadership coach, speaker, and strategic advisor who helps executives lead smarter in a world on fire. As CEO of JG Strategy, she equips business, government, and military leaders to manage risk and turn global disruption into competitive advantage. She's a professor at National Defense University, a fellow at the Fox Leadership International Program at the University of Pennsylvania, and columnist for Forbes and Bloomberg Opinion. She's also a life member of the Council on Foreign Relations. She has advised companies and governments on international and constitutional law, information and cyber warfare, lawfare. We'll find out what that is later, political and regulatory risk, and so much more. And her audiences have included 193 UN member states, Congress, military leaders from over 80 countries, and corporate teams looking to make smarter decisions in the face of global uncertainty. Now, with all of that wealth of information, we do want to make a note here that Dr. Goldenziel is speaking in her personal capacity. Her views are her own and do not necessarily represent those of her university, the Department of Defense, or any other arm of the US government. So that's an important disclaimer. I used to say that when I used to work for the government too. All right, so welcome, Jill, to the show.
Thank you, Mara, for having me. It's really great to be here.
Yeah, super excited to have you. So let's just start with how you got into this kind of work. You got into law, and then what?
So I am a fourth generation lawyer. My family has and still has a firm in Scranton, Pennsylvania, since
Oh,
the
wow.
turn of the last century. And
Wow.
so I always knew that I wanted to be a lawyer. And I got to college and started doing my independent academic work, writing long papers, delving into research. And I discovered, wow, I really love this too. So I looked around me and I talked to all of the people who were my mentors, who all worked on law in some way. And I realized, first of all, that they were all very connected in the real world, which is where I wanted to be. And I realized that it was probably not a coincidence that I chose these people as my mentors. And they all agreed on one thing, which academics never agree on anything, which is that if you wanted to get a JD PhD, you should go to law school first because a PhD is a long slog and you need to make sure that you A, want to do it, and B, also have a degree that enables you to support yourself if you should need that. And so I took their advice, figuring if that many academics agreed, it must be truth. And ended up practicing law for a couple of years, and during which they're pretty consequential. Actually, I went to Israel for a year after college. Second Intifada happened, came back to New York, and 6 weeks later, 9/11 happened.
Hmm.
And so that pushed me from constitutional law, where I was, more into international law and into really wanting to make a difference in the policy space, because it was clear that everything was changing in the world of chaos and geopolitical risk. Went to Harvard for grad school and ended up at a place that I never expected. I was laughing internally when you said this was a surprising perspective, because it's the perspective that surprised me to expect me to have. Um, I went through grad school at Harvard, taught at the law school and the college for a while, and then moved over to the Belfer Center, which is an internal think tank at the Harvard Kennedy School. And a job came over the listserv for Marine Corps University, which I had never heard of, but I had certainly heard of the Marine Corps.
Hmm.
And one of my closest friends in grad school was a Marine. And I knew that I could work for the Corps based on all of my long conversations with him about nation building and how he found the work so meaningful. And his most meaningful nation building was the most meaningful work he had ever done, no matter how dangerous it was. Well, brotherhood was so strong, and I just knew the Marines would appreciate me. They would appreciate the intellectual rigor, but also the crazy side, and certainly the physical fitness that I find to be so important. And so I wanted to do policy relevant academic work since I was 20. I thought this is a chance to do it in my teaching every single day. And the Marines hired a refugee expert to teach the law of war. And the rest is history. Almost 10 years later, I am still in professional military education. Marines left their mark on me. I like to think I left somewhat of a mark on them as well. And we celebrated their belated birthday today at the National Defense University. They rescheduled it so that we could all be there after the furlough, which was phenomenal of them. And and here I am now teaching senior military officers and senior U.S. civilians, foreign military officers, cyber and information strategy, and
Amazing. Yeah.
lawfare as well.
Amazing. Okay. Okay. So, first of all, yes, happy birthday to the Marines, belated 250 years. So, first of all, I can't imagine the kind of conversations you all had at the dinner table if everybody in your family is like four generations of law. There's probably a lot of debating.
A lot of debating. I mean, my dad was a trial lawyer, and I grew up literally playing with his jury exhibits, and certainly the old ones, but sometimes they had to keep me off of them during during the course of a trial. And I just never he would um murder board or moot, whatever you want to call, choose your preferred term, his arguments at the dinner table with me and my mom. And if we could
Yes.
poke holes in them, we could spot the holes in them, then maybe the jury could too, or the other side could as well. And I just really never found anything as fascinating as that.
Yeah, I mean, what great training
Yeah.
for the law field. You mentioned lawfare. I promised our audience that you would define it. So, what is lawfare?
Lawfare is law using law as a tool of strategy or as a weapon of war. And in short, what that means is using law to achieve what might otherwise be achieved through kinetic military means or for a strategic purpose to achieve a strategic goal. I have a more technical definition, but that's the law as a weapon of war is the catchier one that people tend to remember.
Yeah, fascinating. Well, I know we can go down that road on a different podcast, but not on this one. We're going to go back to you. You mentioned, there's a lot that you learned from your 20, year experience with the Marine Corps University and teaching Marines, and hoping that they've picked up something from you as well. So I'd love to hear kind of like, what has your experience been? I know one of the, experiences is that you were the only female full professor at Marine Corps University, and you're also civilian working among a male-dominated leadership-focused organization. So let's just start there. What was that experience like?
It took some getting used to, for sure. But the amazing thing about it is that the Marines are so good at team building and so good at absorbing people that once I would say, got used to each other, both they got used to the fact that I had a PhD in a very different background, but was really genuinely wanted to learn. And I got used to the adjusting to a different language and a different culture. Um, I became part of the team. That was assumed. Trust was really mine to lose from the beginning, and then it took probably a couple of years, but we got from the point where I would walk into a room and immediately become keenly aware that I was the only woman in it to my not realizing I was only the only woman in the room until I had walked out of it. And that was just because I was there for long enough that I had gained a certain amount of respect and was seen as part of the team.
Hmm. Incredible. And so then, um, what did you realize you could teach them?
I realized how important it was to have somebody around in the classroom and teaching who comes from a very different perspective, and also how important to them it was to avoid groupthink because they realized, and I think certainly after in the those who had served really in the war on terror, realized that groupthink could cause a lot of problems, and they would have been better off bringing in people who had very different perspectives. And as long as I approached the classroom with genuine curiosity for them and mutual respect for them and their experiences, despite the fact that I chose to spend, my 20s and 30s in a very different way than the military officers that I was teaching, we were able to learn from each other. I also really, I think, helped them break down certain stereotypes. And I would often, address them head on. The classroom training of really being able to moderate a discussion without and ask Socratic questions without injecting one's views into a conversation was extremely valued by them in ways I really didn't understand until afterwards. Um, I don't think I realized how much they were getting from it until probably about a year in, when I really started getting feedback from my former students about how much they gained from the class and how much they gained from just having a vastly different perspective.
Yeah. Can you say more about the Socratic questioning and how different that was from what they were used to and why it was so valuable to them?
Well, I think first of all, they're just so busy operationally. Their operational tempo, or op tempo, as they call it, is so high when they're in the fleet that they just really don't have time to think about concepts from the 40,000 foot level, which of course is all we do in the ivory tower. They didn't really have the chance to step back in their careers. And these were my students at that time were majors. They were about late 30s and mid to late 30s, I'd say. And they really hadn't had the time in their careers to step back and think about what they were doing and what was happening at the strategic level, in at the really political level, that was really driving what they were doing operationally during the war on terror and why. And there tends to be a stereotype that the military is just disinterested in this. They're not disinterested in this. It's that they're deploying every 3 months, and they're doing workups for deployment in the 3 months before they're deploying every 3 months, and they can't necessarily take the time for that. So really being able to unpack views that they had or developed while they were deployed and abroad was very, very new for them, but also welcome for them, because they certainly had questions about what they were doing that they didn't have the time to dig for answers for.
Yeah, I think that is a just really great way to think about some of the translational stuff that we'll be talking about later on in the show. Is, all leaders are under high pressure and frazzled and managing competing demands and stretched thin and little time to slow down and think with those kind of skill sets like Socratic questions, right? And where you're like taking a step back and getting a broader perspective, for example. And if military leaders can do it and learn it, so can you. So we're going to get into it in a little bit. We are nearing an ad break. So you're listening to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Branco, and our guest today, Dr. Jill Goldenziel. The Hard Skills is sponsored by TowerScope, my leadership and team development consulting firm. Learn more about it at gotowerscope.com. The Hard Skills show itself live streams on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Eastern Time on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, and all over the place through talkradio.nyc. And if you are here right now at, between 5 and 6 p.m. Eastern on a Tuesday, you can also leave us messages or questions or comments, and we will respond live to you. Okay. We will be right back with our guest in just a moment.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, host of The Hard Skills on talkradio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Welcome back to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest, Dr. Jill Goldenziel. So let's get to the meat of it. I do think that military leaders, and especially the Marines, are exceptional at developing teams and leadership, right? They're focused on that continuously. And so there's just so much that we can learn from their experiences. So I would love to hear, what is it that military leaders, especially senior military leaders, understand about strategic thinking during times of chaos and upheaval and uncertainty that the rest of us do not?
So many things. So first of all, I think most people don't understand the importance of and the focus of education, focus on education and planning in the military. Mm-hmm. So you asked during, but I can't separate that from what happens before. Mm-hmm. So most people don't realize that our service members go to school every few years, and they have continuing education programs and requirements throughout. And they have continuing education programs. There are also then in-person master's degree programs that some of them are selected for. And if they're selected for an in-person master's degree program at command and staff or at the war college level, like I teach at now at the National Defense University, it's usually because they're being fast-tracked for some sort of leadership opportunity later. And then there are other opportunities besides the year-long, year away from the service that you may be lucky enough to get if you do the master's programs. And I know a number of Marines who also have master's degrees from the Naval Postgraduate School. Most people don't realize that all of our general officers have master's degrees from war colleges as well. All of them, every single one. It's a prerequisite to be a general. So they understand, first of all, that it is really important every few years to be able to take that break, to look at what they're doing from the 40,000 foot view, and to be able to, first of all, understand what's going on at the strategic level. But secondly, a lot of these are planning schools. We teach planning at each of these schools, which was something that was very, very new to me. And I mean, the military faculty that tend to teach planning, but the civilians are very much involved. And you can't you can't plan for everything, but the DoD certainly tries. DoD has plans on the shelf for just about every single agency. And baked into that planning process is the second thing I was going to mention, which is wargaming or red teaming or comparing your options for various plans. Really, generally, all of those things together, really working on a problem and then playing it out against a thinking adversary played by members of your community, but also they understand very much that it's important to have, anthropologists, political scientists, refugee experts, lawyers, civilians who don't know anything about the military playing members of the red team or participating in a war game in order to shoot holes in a plan. And this is something they've always done, but it's become increasingly important in recent years. And I don't think civilian organizations really understand this is as well. And there's expletives involved in the way that the military says it. So I'll say it the way that Mike Tyson says it, which is, any plan is great until you get punched in the mouth or something like that. And like this is true, right? You can't plan for everything, but if you've been through every iteration of a plan, the more iterations you go through, the easier it becomes to adjust in a moment when things get difficult. Military is also great about having lots of processes for everything. Unfortunately, this creates bureaucracy and sometimes it can get frustrating and sometimes there are just too many acronyms. But when you have so many processes in place and really menus of them to draw from, then when you're faced with a crisis and you have a million fires that you need to put out, you can more easily pull back, rely on that framework, rely on first principles, rely on your framework for who does what within an organization to really be able to pull apart that problem and put out that fire quickly. And not only that, be able to focus on the overall intent and long-term goals.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing in all of this is that the more you practice and learn from what you're practicing and also get lots of input from diverse perspectives who, can poke holes so you can consistently revise, the more you're ready for lots of different scenarios without having to become overwhelmed, which most of us do, right? Like when you haven't practiced all of the different scenarios, our emotions, our anxiety, our reactions, our stress level overwhelm our ability to think through the different options because we haven't had enough practice to make it a little bit more natural for us. Would you say that applies? Absolutely.
And you start to, it's like playing a sporting event over and over again. Like you can practice. You're not necessarily going to be ready for what happens on game day. But the more that you play your game against different teams in your league, you start to really understand what the options are for what teams will do in response to the moves that you've practiced, or what your team is used to, and you're operating well as a team. So then you can understand how to respond whenever new scenarios, new plays pop up.
Yeah, and the other thing that I'm hearing also in that connection with how you work, you practice on sports teams is that you learn to overcome and not be bothered by or take personally mistakes or quote unquote failures, or when other people point out what doesn't work. Most of us don't have that kind of thick skin. Most of us get defensive. Most of us will bristle. Most of us will not even invite people to look at how we're doing something and give us feedback because we're so afraid of getting that feedback. But in fact, that's shooting ourselves in the foot. It's really sabotaging. And we can learn a lot from that, like leaning into just learning and iterating, and that it's just a continuous improvement process, really.
When being shot down, not literally, is part of the process, you begin to take it as such, right? When having holes poked in your argument is part of the process, you learn to take it as such, and you also don't get as attached to whatever plan it is you've come up with, because you realize that it can fail, and then what the real skill is being able to pivot and come up with a better one.
Yeah. Makes me think back, to your story about sitting around the dinner table debating. Is like, you just get used to getting your idea shot down and not take it personally, but like engaging in the process from like a curious perspective to see where it takes you, right? So now how can we translate this to everyday civilian leaders, right? Whether they're in organizations or they own their own business, they're not necessarily facing the kind of threats that military leaders are. But what can they sort of take from this and apply to their own world?
I think that scenario planning, or wargaming, whether or not they want to call it that, or red teaming, is really something that can be incorporated into any organization. And the process of planning, developing multiple courses of action, comparing those courses of action is really something that can work for almost any, whether it's a program planning process, whether it's planning an offer, whether it's just figuring out how some kind of an event is going to work. And it's extremely important and useful for being able to pivot when something goes wrong. And it also helps you, it helps you generate ideas for what you may want to do next, even if it's not something that applies.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, in the beginning of building my own business, I had an advisory team. They're not like a group of people that have been staying with me as my advisory board, but like just a team I pulled together from different perspectives. And I presented in front of them what my plan was and how I was thinking about it. And then I asked them to poke holes. And it was really hard, but it was so useful just that one time that it probably took me for, the next 7 years to work through all of the things that they recommended. And I think I need to do it again now that you're saying how like it's really good to keep practicing. Tell us about, for those who aren't familiar, and I think you kind of described it, but I want to double check. Red teaming, wargaming. What are they, and how do they look different?
Red teaming is really having it's a term that is it's used loosely in a variety of contexts. It can be used to play the bad guy or the red cell in a planning exercise, and it can be used more loosely to just have a group of people really picking apart your ideas as you go through any particular planning process, or to figure out ways to disrupt it. And then wargaming is actually coming up with a plan or a scenario and having two sides play it out or fight it out. So the key to, and you can have various countries, I've designed them for, I just designed one for a conference where we had, China, the US, but we also had a Pacific Island, and then we had a private sector team, and they had to negotiate over a certain influence in a certain Pacific Island. And of course, then the government the government of that island had their own equities and things that they wanted as well. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be just one side versus another. There can be various teams representing various interests, but the key is that you have some kind of competition and some kind of thinking adversary. Those are the key words, really. A thinking adversary who is going to respond to what you do, not just what you might not imagine they would do, but be able to respond and react to what your team does in real time.
Got it. Okay, so I think she's driving home this idea of like, it is important and good to poke holes in your ideas and try it lots of different ways and practice and think about it from different perspectives and invite different perspectives to give you feedback. So we're reaching another ad break. When we come back, we are going to look at how new issues in the world today, like cyber and informatics and AI, is causing us even more disruption, and what to do with that when we're trying to do some strategic thinking. So you're listening to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest today, Dr. Jill Goldenziel, and we will be right back in just a moment.
Misalignment within your sales team or with the client stalls deals and creates unnecessary friction for you and the client, resulting in up to 37% lower win rate. If you're in pre-sales, sales, sales management, or sales enablement, and you'd like to increase revenues, win rate, margins, client satisfaction, and stay competitive, this show is for you. Hi, I'm Art Fromm, host of the Making Seamless Sales Show. Please join me live Thursdays at 7 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
Have you ever wondered what truly lies beneath the calm? I'm Jacinta Yang. Join me every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time on Talk Radio NYC as we explore healing, self-discovery, and space where science meets spirits to help you find peace in a busy world. Take a deep breath and tune in to Beneath the Calm, where every conversations guide you back to the calm within.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to The Hard Skills. Okay, Jill. So has anything changed about how the military is doing things now with the education, the playing it out, the practicing, the poking holes, the, bringing out diverse perspectives, the war games, the red teaming, with the increasing online disruptions like AI and cyber and informatics and things like that?
So I can really only speak to my corner of the world, I would say, which includes education and then also the some of the units that I advise and work with, and mainly legal offices. I can't really speak to what the military is doing overall.
And you shouldn't.
I don't. I don't know what's going on with weapon systems, and that's probably a good thing. So, but I think that it's really similar to what's going on in the business world. Quite honestly, we're figuring out how we can use it and how we can use it safely. And as educators, we are really trying to figure out what the best way to use it is to serve our students. And I don't think what we are dealing with at I can't fully speak to everything that's going on at my college, because I think we still have not quite figured it out yet. We have an AI policy, but I think that my comments on it when it was written was this needs to be revisited every 3 months at the rate that technology is changing. So I don't think any full decisions have been made, and instructors, as at most universities, have a certain amount of discretion as to what we can do. But the core question is, how do we best serve our students? This isn't going away, right? I think it would be unrealistic to say no, students can't use AI at all. In fact, my son's high school is doing that, and I don't think it's necessarily a good thing. Like, I'm glad he's learning research skills without the use of AI. I imagine that could be really difficult to police at the high school level, but I don't want him to have no exposure to it either, because he's going to go out into the world, and certainly in college, and plenty of kids are. So I don't want him to be behind as we're all developing and learning this. And then I look at my students, of course, who are not 15, but who are now in their 40s. And it's the same sort of question. It's like, okay, well, this is my 1 year of where they have, in-person postgraduate education. Some of them already have master's degrees, some of them don't, but this is a master's degree program. I am failing with them. I'm failing them if I don't get them out of school with research and writing skills. And if they can't write better when they come out than when they came in. At the same time, they're going to go out and probably be able to use AI in their commands. So it's now an additional skill I have to teach to what AI can do, what AI can't do well, and thinks it can do everything. That's part of the problem. So what AI can't do well, and then make sure they have the critical thinking skills to be able to check it and make sure it's not hallucinating on some kind of big decision. So, and I think that's probably a microcosm of what's going on elsewhere in the military, but really in any other workplace worldwide, except the stakes are greater, right? If the military makes some kind of decision based on AI, the stakes could be greater for the world when rather than the lawyer who cites fake cases and puts it before a court and gets called out and perhaps has some kind of sanction against him. There's a much bigger, there's much more at risk if the military misuses it. So I think the adjustment for me is, how do I balance this? How do I help them learn the skills that they are going to need, in addition to everything else I have to teach?
Yeah. And so going back to then strategic thinking in during a time of chaos and upheaval, what is your current thinking, knowing that it could change in 3 months?
Yeah.
What is your current thinking about how AI can help with strategic thinking and how it could get in the way of strategic thinking?
So AI can be your red team, or your first line of effort, I guess with a red team, which is a lot of how I use it. I'll say, I wrote this argument, poke holes in it, and sometimes it does a better job than others, but so that's something I think that can be very, very useful. But it doesn't at the same time replace independent human judgment. And as we've found out when running various scenarios, and it certainly doesn't understand, military strategy. So you can put information into it, but it's not necessarily going to understand how a certain maneuver might affect enemy actions. So yeah, it can be your first, your devil's advocate, I guess I would say, more than your red team, but it's not necessarily going to understand your industry. It's not necessarily going to understand, how your actual adversary would think. Will it get there? Will we be able to, will any industry be able to program it to think like us or think like an adversary? I don't know. If you believe the people who really believe in artificial general intelligence, then sure. But I am more skeptical based on what I've seen that it can really emulate human judgment. I certainly don't think it can emulate emotional intelligence. And I don't think it can weigh the trade-offs involving loss of human life the way that a real commander or military officer would.
Really great points. Yeah. So then let's take a real life scenario, just to bring some kind of connection or relatedness to somebody who might not be in the military, but is in a leadership role. They are facing, like a situation where they're constantly putting out fires. Everything's changing almost daily. They're trying so hard to be strategic, and yet they feel like every time they make a decision, something else happens and they have to go back on it, right? And they're starting to feel like, what's the point? Like, throw my hands up, just put out the fires. That feels like I have more control, right? Than thinking long term, or thinking about all of the scenarios. So I'm curious, what would you, well, have you worked with leaders like that, and what have you seen as kind of ways that they've been able to extract themselves from that and become more strategic thinkers? Or if you've seen kind of the opposite, when they've really struggled over and over, what were kind of like the common pitfalls?
Yes. So I think what it really comes back to is having a clear sense of what your overall intent is and what your overall goal is, and then figuring out a way to progress towards that. So if you're looking at the fires, you may not be looking at the right thing. What you need to be looking at is the way through the fires or around the fires, or perhaps putting out the fires. But you have to figure out what the best way is to get to where you want to go. And what that requires is really being able to take that step back and focus on what the overall goal is, and then figuring out the best way to get there. I'd say another thing that came to mind during the course of our conversation, and I can bring it back to a very real world example that everyone can relate to. Anyone who's ever been on a plane can relate to, which is that Marines have this cultural way of getting very calm at moments of chaos. And I just noticed this over the course of time. And you just knew it was going to, it's the opposite of what anybody thinks it's going to be, right? Because everybody imagines that there's like this crisis and people are yelling and screaming at each other, and then like one general is barking orders and everybody falls into line or something like that. Instead, what happens when there's some kind of crisis and something goes really wrong is everybody gets really quiet, sometimes even like talking in a whisper, and slows down. And I was on an international trip. I was stuck in Iceland, stuck in Reykjavik in the middle of the summer. And I was stuck there for 2 days. And like the second time the flight got canceled, they told us at the airline told us at the airport, and by the way, you're all on your own for hotel rooms because there's nothing booked in the city. There's nothing open in the city, and the crew has no idea where we're going to stay. Okay. So at that moment, a Marine friend of mine, a colonel, texted me and said, "Are you home yet?" And I explained, I'm like, "No, I'm stuck here." And then it was like we both moved into this very quiet and calm. And I started looking for hotels for me. And he immediately, sitting in Virginia, started looking at hotels for me and figuring it out. And we were going back and forth with the plan of who looked at the Hiltons and who looked at the Marriotts. And then I finally figured out a place. And then, walked out and was, back in normal mode at normal speed. And I thought to myself, what just happened? Like, it's across the ocean. He's not even here. We're doing this by text message. And yet we both knew, and I hadn't even been working with him for like 2 years at that point. We both knew to immediately, at this moment where everybody's panicking, move back into calm and what exactly to do and how to communicate with each other. And I thought, this is so weird. I mean, this Marine green stuff has steeped into my blood, but this is a very good thing because I would not have been handling it well if he had not been there, bizarrely on text message at the right time, to like bring me into that state.
I love this story. Yeah. And we often call that slowing down to speed up, right?
Yes.
The same thing happens, with speed racers is, they see the curve coming up. They can't continue speeding at the way that they, have been. In order for them not to crash, they're going to have to slow down to manage the curve. Right? It's the same idea. And a lot of leaders do not slow down in order to speed up. But if you do the kinds of things that Jill has been talking about, it becomes ingrained in the way that colonel did, where he like knows when to slow down and how to use that slow down process in order to help you speed up and get into what you need. But that takes so much practice, right, and experience to know that this is the time, and how to get focused. So we are reaching another ad break, and I'd love to kind of open this up now more broadly when we come back about what other ways we can think about why strategic thinking helps, whether it's through trust, creating trust among people, creating alignment, all of those things that we need in organizations for positive culture. So you're listening to the Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest today, Dr. Jill Goldenziel, and we'll be right back in just a moment.
On Frank About Health, we're not just talking healthcare. We're managing disruption and innovation. Over the last 4 years, I've taken you from epilepsy and COVID to mental health, caregiving, and now the front lines of healthcare transformation. Stay tuned for a healthier future as we bring on the innovators, professionals, storytellers, and advocates who show you how to own your healthcare every Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a purpose-driven individual looking for deeper healing, clarity, and growth? Welcome to the Expansion Room, a transformative space for purpose-driven individuals. I'm Siobhan Larice, host, licensed therapist, and coach. Join me every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to the Hard Skills. Okay, Jill. So what are some applications of strategic thinking besides managing crises and chaos? Some of the things that I was thinking about were like how you think about developing a positive work culture. But you might have like real specific ways that folks can start thinking about like the applicability of this this kind of competency.
I think it is mainly about having a plan and then figuring out concrete steps to align leaders within an organization with that plan or with that vision, and then concrete steps involving how to execute it. This is going to sound familiar to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And so then when we think about the situations where we need to have a really strong plan, and we think about like leaders who are, as you said, like thinking about their intention, their goal as for front and center as the most important thing, so that they're not allowing those fires to take them away from that focus. Mm-hmm. Do you think it's still realistic to have 10-year plans, to have even 5-year plans? I get this question all the time, so I'm curious what you think about that.
Yes, I think it's important to have that plan for where you are going to go, and then to keep revisiting it as circumstances arise along the way. And it's fine to adjust your goals. It's fine to adjust your end state based on market conditions or life conditions or whatever may happen in the meantime. But you need to be able to have something to focus on and move towards.
Yeah.
And you need to be able to have concrete steps how to get there, and then revisit, well, what worked, what didn't, what opportunities are new that have opened up, what happens now that there's AI and I can have ChatGPT on my desktop, and what can I build that I can where I can team better with AI in order to do a job better or get to a milestone faster, et cetera.
Yeah. And I think a lot of this comes down to the reason that you plan is actually to be flexible. This is what I'm hearing from you, right? Like,
yes,
it's not to be rigid, it's to be ready. And
I like that.
Yeah. Well, I just made it up. I heard it from you, and I'm
going to use that.
Excellent. High five. Go us. Yeah, if you set a long-term goal or intention, it doesn't mean you're going to follow a very rigid, clear path. It just means you have to figure out how to constantly pivot every time you get thrown a curveball. And there's only one way you're going to learn how to pivot constantly and well, is to practice those skills that you just described, right? About planning and scenario setting and, simulation and those kinds of things. So in the last bit here, I'm curious, you work in the realm of lawfare and geopolitical risk. Do business owners need to know that kind of information if they're not operating globally? Do they still need to know that? And if so, why?
Yes, I think I need to explain this less than I used to, because everyone has been hit by tariffs. And very few people, if any, saw it coming, that there were going to be global tariffs levied on the entire world and then brought back and then move forward. and everybody that I know and have worked with has been hit by them in some way, shape, or form. This is not the only major shock we're going to see. It's just the most tangible and most visible to a lot of people. But as I don't want to get alarmist, but as strategic competition with China ramps up, and if it ever should come to conflict, we're going to be hit with much worse. And every household's going to feel it. Every business is going to feel it. And every business needs to be thinking about it, monitoring it, and being prepared. COVID was another one. I mean, who wasn't affected by supply chains at some point during COVID? Most people hadn't spent a lot of time thinking about supply chains before COVID. And suddenly it was very much a household topic of discussion. So even if countries don't operate internationally, what happens internationally affects the products and processes they use here. It's no longer something businesses can avoid.
Yeah. Honestly, what I'm reflecting as you're talking is that we really can no longer afford to have this sort of America bubble where, you stay optimistic and in denial. Like, you have to be realistic and pragmatic, and you have to sort of plan for all scenarios and be tracking the trends and concerns, looking at what's happening in one place in the world and another place, and how that might potentially affect you. And it doesn't mean that you're being negative or, morbid or whatever. It means you're just being planful and pragmatic and realistic. And if it never comes to fruition, great. At least you plan for it. And if it does, you're ready, even better.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
You're probably becoming a more informed citizen of the world in the process, which is not a bad side effect, even if nothing comes of it.
Not such a bad thing. Right. Okay. So if people want to learn more about you and working with you, because you also do a lot of work outside of that, with teams and things like that. If they want to learn more, how can they find out more?
Sure. I'm at jillgoldenziel.com. I am at Jill Goldenziel on just about every platform. And I'm Jill Goldenziel Strategy. Oh, thank you, Mira. There I am. There's the website. I am Jill Goldenziel at Jill Goldenziel Strategy on YouTube as well.
Excellent. And for those of you who are watching the recording or live right now, I'm showing the jillgoldenziel.com. She's got information about consulting and speaking and arbitration and all the millions of things that she does. And I'm drooling over your website also. It's fabulous. It's very impressive. So, audience, what did you take away from today? And more importantly, what is one small change you can implement this week based on what you learned from Jill? We talked about lots of great ideas. We talked about education and planning in advance. We talked about continuous learning, taking breaks and reflecting, right? And planning during those breaks. We talked about playing it out and practicing, bringing diverse perspectives. We talked about poking holes in things and who can do that for you? Who do you trust besides AI that can also do that for you? We talked about red teaming and wargaming and how can you apply that even if you're not in the military, and that there's a process for everything in the military. Can you have a process for everything for yourself, so that you're ready, right? So what is one small change that you can implement this week based on anything that you've learned? Share it with us on LinkedIn so we can cheer you on. That's where Jill and I live online. And also talkradio.nyc is also there. The Hard Skills is also on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, Apple, Spotify, Amazon. I hear we're going to Substack now. That's exciting. So if today's episode resonated with you, share it with a colleague or leave a review. And if you're looking for more personalized support, leadership or team coaching, you could also head to my website, gotowerscope.com, to schedule a consultation. I want to thank talkradio.nyc for hosting. Together, we will navigate the complexities of leadership and emerge stronger on the other side. Thank you for joining me and Dr. Jill Goldenziel today on this journey. This is Dr. Mira Branco signing off. And until next time, stay steady, stay present, and keep building those hard skills muscles. Take care, everybody.